You're listening to The Secret to My Success, an interview-style podcast that asks our guests what trait, skill, or characteristic they possess that's made them a success. Hosted by Shelby Skurhawk.
When my grandmother broke her hip in January, the nurses couldn't believe she was 93 years old. We had to explain that the baseline for this very petite patient was independent and self-sufficient and really sharp as a tack. She was an avid reader, a crossword puzzler, and even a video gamer. But recovering from hip surgery was no small feat, and this little abuela worked hard to get walking. And by the way, I never called her abuela or abuelita or grandma even. I called her mom because that's what my mom called her and even my dad, and they never corrected me. At 93, she was doing physical therapy 3 times a week. The therapist said that she was their oldest patient there and still advancing faster than some of the less motivated patients there. But something I heard a lot from the nurses was that my grandma reminded them of Coco. They'd asked if I'd seen the Pixar movie, and I told them not yet. With my grandmother in the hospital, then spending long days that turned into weeks in skilled nursing, I wasn't sure if I could handle a Pixar film about grandparents, Mexican culture, and death. Because this is Pixar we're talking about here. Up, Inside Out. These are movies that are absolutely made for crying, and I've certainly done my share at them. But there was something that I learned from the movie Inside Out that I think is pertinent here. Sadness is more powerful an emotion than joy. Sure, joy is wonderful, and it feels good when you have it. But sadness is a necessary part of life, the low to life's high. And based on the movie Coco, an emotion we feel when we lose someone that's special to us, but different because death is something that makes us very human. So I still haven't seen Coco, but I'm ready to, finally. Because I know in being with my grandmother in her last moments on this earth, taking her very last breath, death is not as scary as I thought. It's not the end, but a beginning. And while I'm sad that we lost her, I know that she was blessed with nearly 95 wonderful years on this earth. That was the eulogy that I gave at my grandmother's funeral in December. In writing that, because something that I've come to realize, death is something that we're all going to go through. It's all going to happen to us, and we're all going to experience taking care of loved ones that are dying and about to die. So what I don't understand is that for something that every single person will be faced with at some point in their life, why is it so taboo to talk about? And why is it so foreign to us? That's what I wanted to explore. So my guest today, Barbara Karnes, is a prolific author about death and hospice. She's a former hospice nurse herself, and she's written countless books about the process of dying. It was actually in hospice at the T. Boone Pickens inpatient hospice facility that I was handed one of her books. It was called Gone From My Sight, The Dying Experience. And I was amazed at the detail that she went into this whole process, but I could see it from my eyes, but I could also see it from my mom's eyes, where death was very, very foreign to her. She was honestly scared of this whole process and unsure of the unknowns. So I invited Barbara to come on the show to talk about all the things that we fear about death, talking about the kind of frequently asked questions about death and hospice and the misconceptions about it. And then I wanted to just understand her point of view about being a nurse that deals solely with death, what that means for somebody and how that affects you, but also what type of person you become as a result of that. I might give a warning about this episode just because we're talking about the sensitive topic of death. That might be a little uncomfortable or a little disturbing to hear. However, if you're in this caregiving situation, I think you're going to appreciate the honest discussion about what to expect and how to deal with the emotions as both a caregiver and a griever.
Well, it's interesting in that I went into nursing right out of high school, and my mother wanted me to be a nurse. I never really wanted to be a nurse, but I graduated from nursing school, but I never worked because I didn't really like it. So I married, raised a family, and in the 70s, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in Chicago started writing books about dying, and she was saying that we in the medical profession were not taking good care of people who were dying in the hospitals, and all of that seemed to resonate with me. It was kind of like, yes, yes, this is what I'm interested in. So I had kept my license, but there was a hospice in Kansas City, and I started as a volunteer. And then within 4 months, I became a paid staff nurse and eventually ended up being the director of that hospice. But working with end of life, I knew that this was where I belonged, that this was where what had meaning for me in doing something with my life.
So finding something that really resonated with you, that was kind of an aha moment for you. But was it surprising to you or to your mother or other family that you found such a connection with what would be still a very heavy topic and a heavy profession?
Most people didn't understand why I was interested in end of life. I had gone through many classes and probably every book that's out there on self-help and had been looking for years for what am I going to do with my life? What does life mean? So by the time I approached hospice, I really had a good foundation within myself on what I thought life and death and afterlife, all of that, I felt I knew what it meant for me. And so I can remember the first Thanksgiving that I went home after I started working for hospice. And I called back to the office to see how a specific patient was doing, and that patient had died. And I hung up and I said, my patient died. And my mother looked at me and she said, well, Barbara, are you sure that you're doing everything all right? Because all of your patients are dying. And what, as surprising as that sounds, that's most people's mentality, is that when someone dies, particularly in the United States, then the medical profession has done something wrong. It's a failure. The medical profession is at fault here. And what we need to help people understand is that everybody dies. It is very much a natural part of life. We are born, we experience, and we die. Yeah. And so that, that's the foundation that I work from.
That's right on target as far as the kind of general mentality about life and death. When it comes to healthcare, a lot of people don't understand what the bigger picture, I guess. Because something that fascinates me is that when you're a caregiver, you just get used to trying to make your loved one better. Like you're getting them to eat, you're getting them to drink, you're encouraging them to walk more and to kind of get back to normal. But especially with the elderly, I think you get into such a routine that you forget maybe what the goal is. I know that certainly happened to my mother, and it happened to me, where we got so caught up in we're trying to make her better, that at a certain point when she had turned a corner, we couldn't wrap our brain around shifting your mind to more of end of life care.
Mm-hmm. Other people die. I'm not going to die, and neither is anyone close to me. Mm-hmm. Other people die. And it isn't until we're smacked over the head with someone close to us that is dying that illusion is taken away. And you're right. When we start out, generally speaking, there is a disease that is diagnosed, and your first thing is, well, we're going to fix it, treat it, and we're going to make it better. And we put all of our energy into that, and we almost feel disloyal to shift gears and say, oh, that's not going to work. My loved one is going to die. And to come to that realization, there's almost a guilt there that, am I not trying? And I think that that's a part of the dynamic. And then you add the fact that nobody wants to talk about it in the first place. Mm-hmm. So even getting a physician to say, we've done what we can do, and we can't fix mom. Physicians are hesitant to say that. And our society says, if you can't fix someone, then somebody's at fault. Someone has failed. Yeah. When in reality, everybody dies.
Why do you think we feel that disloyalty to shift gears? What is that block that prevents us from believing that they're going to die?
I wonder how much of that is our culture. Mm-hmm. We're such a progressive, fix-it, modern culture that it's almost inconceivable that we can't fix something. And then you look at medicine and all the amazing things that we can do. And the fact that we can put someone on life support, and I hesitate to use the word life support because in my mind, there's more to life mm-hmm. than breathing. But we can keep a body breathing and feed them for a very long time. And it's hard to get a family to come to terms with letting go when, I could sit at mom's bedside and hold her hand, even though she's on a respirator and I've got her. If you think about it, grief, and when someone is very ill, we're doing preparatory grieving and not even aware of it. Grief is really about how we feel about what we're losing. I think that's an element of our preparatory grief also. It's about my needs, and I need my mom, and it's hard to think of not having my mom.
Right.
So I won't think about it.
So it's almost a self-preservation technique just to ignore the inevitable.
And I'm going to say, Mom, you got to eat. You got to eat, and that's the key. And when in reality we eat to live, and so the body all by itself is going to cut back and stop eating. But that's the biggest focus that we caregivers tune in on. Mom's not eating and she's got to eat. And that means I'm doing something as a caregiver, and that's a huge focus, eating.
Yeah, even to the point where they're having difficulty swallowing, and it's becoming more of a concern for them to eat and aspirate.
We still want to feed them. Yeah.
Yep. And I think you either in that particular Gone From My Sight or in some of your other blogs, you talk about that's a very human need. That's a caregiving need. So just from the time that we're kids and you're taking care of someone and you feed them soup, that's a tradition. It's a kind of a social mores to feed someone to make them feel better, right?
Well, and we also use food as an expression of love. We eat for a lot of reasons, but an expression of love is one of the things we use with food. And so, Mom, I'm gonna make your favorite apple pie and just eat it, please. It's your favorite, because I love you and I want you to stay here with me.
And when she doesn't eat that, then there's disappointment and feeling of failure because they wouldn't eat.
That's right.
Yep.
Right.
So, all of going back to something you were saying about life support and that you kind of hesitate to use that term, and it occurred to me that a pacemaker is not naturally going to stop, as far as I think I understand. What are some of the issues that come into play, I guess?
Well, I had a gentleman on a respirator at home, and when his body died and his heart stopped, the respirator was still going. As he and I and the family were there around the bed, we were like, how are we going to know when he's dead? And what was interesting is that we're sitting on his bed, we're looking at scrapbooks, we're talking and loving him while he's dying. And all of a sudden, the energy in the room shifted. It's hard for me to put into words, except that all of us just knew that he was gone. It felt different. Most people on hospice, our work is to guide that family, to educate that family on what's going to happen and what it's going to be like, what is it going to look like, and what you can do while all of this is happening. That's the work of end of life people, because there's hospice, there's end-of-life doulas, there's transition volunteers, there's Nobody Dies Alone volunteers. So it's not just hospice, but there are a lot of people now that are learning about how people die, what it's like, what it looks like, and how to guide people through that experience, as well as guide the person that is dying. In the months before death, the person is alert and interactive. As weeks to days to hours before death occur, they're not. They're withdrawn, and they're not really working on this level. They're doing very hard work to get out of their body. They're like a little chick trying to work hard to get out of their shell, but it's a different kind of work.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way of putting it, because you say that they become more withdrawn. Why? I guess explain a little bit about that, what that means to become withdrawn, and why they're operating at a different level.
In the months before death from disease and years before death from old age, where there's no disease process, three things start happening. One is person eating habits change, their sleeping habits change, and they start withdrawing. And why do they start withdrawing ever so slowly? Starts out months, they're not interested in their favorite sports team. And then pretty soon they're not interested in the church ladies coming over. And then eventually they're not interested in the family members or what's going on. And then they go completely within. And they're disconnecting their threads. They're letting go of their hold on this planet, and they're building their place in the other world. So it's natural that they would start withdrawing, because that focus for their life and their work is going inward. That's what they're doing now. So they don't need outside around them. And with that withdrawal comes sleeping more. Starts months before death with an afternoon nap, and then a morning and an afternoon nap. And then they're sleep all night in front of the TV, wake them up, put them to bed, and they sleep all night. And then one day they don't get out of bed.
Right.
And they're asleep more than they're awake. So there's just this natural progression of withdrawing from this world. And the same is with food. They stop eating meat months before death. And then it's fruits and vegetables. And then you're doing good if you can get soft soups and custards down them. And then, pretty soon it's a protein supplement or a malt or ice cream. And then they're not eating at all because they're letting go.
Right. And this is all happening consciously or subconsciously? Does the dying person understand that they are starting to wind down their life, or is it just a bodily process that happens kind of without them realizing it?
It depends on the person's personality, how attuned to